On this Monday night, Canada in mourning again after the deadly crash of a Snowbirds jet in BC. The horror in the air and the heroes on the ground.
We basically just ran over.
The critical clues caught on video. Our Robin Gill is in Kamloops tonight. Fond memories of a friend.
She was up for adventure and up for learning and up for talking about anything.
The life and loss of Captain Jen Casey. Breaking news from the White House, why the U.S. president says he's taking a drug that's not approved for use against COVID-19. And multi-million-dollar boosts, the Chinese president's promise to help fight COVID-19.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Their mission was to soar over the country, lifting the collective spirit of the nation during the pandemic. Tonight, Canada's Snowbirds are grounded and are mourning one of their own. Operation Inspiration came to a crashing halt on Sunday when one of the jets plummeted to the ground shortly after takeoff from the airport in Kamloops, BC. An investigation is now underway into what went wrong. The crash killed Captain Jen Casey, a public affairs officer, but the pilot, Captain Richard MacDougall, survived. A number of people were watching the takeoff and taking videos, and those will likely play a role in the investigation. It all happened less than a minute after takeoff from Kamloops Airport, shortly before noon on Sunday. Everything looked routine. The two Snowbirds were en route to Kamloops, BC, the Tudor jets flying side by side. On this shot, at about 23 seconds in, you can hear a slight pop in the engine. A split second later, one of the jets peels away and gains altitude.
As he starts to climb, we call that a zoom, and he's trying to convert airspeed into altitude. In aviation, we say that airspeed is life, altitude is life insurance. And so having that extra altitude creates two options. One is sort out the problem while you're further from the ground, and the second is to create more space between the airplane and the ground to eject.
It keeps rising until about 35 seconds when it appears to stall and begins to nosedive. At 39 seconds, you can see what appear to be two ejections, but no visible sign of parachutes. And about 41 seconds after takeoff, the Snowbird crashes into a residential neighborhood. The pilot landed on the roof of a house. Remarkably, no one on the ground was injured. Neighbors rushed to the scene to help. Robin Gill is in Kamloops, BC tonight and has been talking to some of them. Robin.
Donna, as you mentioned, the plane went down in a residential neighborhood just a few minutes from here, and that is why so many neighbors were able to rush to the scene. Some of them are nurses, some of them are paramedics, and they're among the many people here in Kamloops who have dropped off flags and cards and flowers in a very touching tribute to the Snowbirds, because what this community witnessed was very devastating.
Spectators on the ground knew within seconds that something was wrong.
We heard a big bang, saw the two pilots be ejected, and then we basically just ran over.
The plane hit a house and burst into flames. An elderly couple lives in the home. Remarkably, they weren't hurt, but the pilot landed on the roof and suffered serious injuries. Captain Richard MacDougall is one of the coordinators for the Snowbirds team. According to colleagues, the 34-year-old is well trained with an affinity for singing. Witnesses say he was asking about his teammate while dealing with his own pain.
He was on a stretcher. I don't think they wanted him to walk because he was complaining of back injuries, but yeah, he was wiggling his toes and his fingers.
Phillips and her mom, a retired nurse, rushed to the scene to help. That's when they noticed the other member of the Snowbirds in the backyard.
Her injuries were likely that impact. And the ejection seat was beside her. So, and I don't think their parachutes opened at all.
No.
There was nothing anyone could do to save Captain Jennifer Casey. She and MacDougall often flew together. Casey was the public affairs spokesperson for the Snowbirds and recently discussed a crash involving the Snowbirds in Atlanta, Georgia.
Thankfully, everybody was able to walk away from that incident. The pilot, Captain Kevin de Montgrenier, used his skills and training to put the plane in an unpopulated area, and everybody was able to walk away.
The day of the crash that took her life, the Snowbirds faced delays because of weather and, according to one pilot, a technical problem.
All right, so we're on the ground in Kamloops. Unfortunately, because of some electrical malfunctions, a few of us had to come back early.
The Snowbirds jets are now grounded at the airport in Kamloops. The military has its own investigative team looking into the matter.
The precise circumstances leading up to the crash are not known. The crash site has been secured by local law enforcement, and the immediate flight safety response is being coordinated on the ground by the team's flight safety officers as we speak.
The memorial for Captain Casey grows, a community heartbroken for a woman they didn't even know.
Obviously, it's very, very sad that this would have happened in a time when they're trying to inspire and keep the morale up of all Canadians. It's a tough day.
The Prime Minister and his Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan have expressed their condolences, and they, like the rest of Canada, are hoping to get answers from the military investigation that has been launched. A key witness, though, will be Captain MacDougall, who did survive this crash, but he's still in hospital with very serious injuries, Donna.
Right, Robin Gill in Kamloops, BC, thanks. Well, the fact the pilot survived gives investigators a big advantage. He will hopefully be able to give them a first-hand account of every second of that takeoff and crash. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson has been talking to people about the investigation. Mercedes, who will lead it?
Well, Donna, this will be led by the Directorate of Flight Safety, which is part of the Air Force, and they will do this using Air Force experts as well as experts, if necessary, from Transport Canada to get involved in civil aviation. They conduct the investigation whenever there is a military crash. It's not the Transportation Safety Board or the civilian authorities, but it's essentially the same way of going about it. So they are going to be gathering evidence on the ground. They're going to be interviewing those who witnessed the crash, especially the pilot, hoping that he might be able to tell them what happened, or at least the sequence of events that could give them some hints. And of course, they'll also be looking at that video that the rest of us have been, trying to determine why he suddenly loses power. And that's where you see him do that zoom maneuver, and where we just heard in the press conference from Lieutenant Colonel French that he ran out of options and made the command decision that they had to eject out of the aircraft. We should have an initial sense of what they think happened within 30 days, Lieutenant Colonel French said, but it could take up to a year for the investigation to be completed.
Mercedes, ejection is what these pilots train for. It is a split-second decision, and it's what saved the pilot's life in this case. We know it's happened before in these Tudor jets. How much of a factor might the ejection seats be in the investigation?
Well, it will certainly be a factor. And we learned a little bit in this press conference when Lieutenant Colonel French revealed that both people had successfully ejected out of the plane, because that wasn't clear from watching it. Looked like there could be two ejections, but we weren't completely sure. The question will be, did the seats function as they were intended to? These are older seats, so in newer aircraft, you can eject much lower to the ground, pilots tell me, and it's much more survivable. These are older aircraft. They're not designed to save your life at a low altitude. And they will be looking at whether that seat separated properly and whether or not that was any kind of a factor in Captain Casey's death. It has been a factor in past deaths of Snowbird pilots that there have been malfunctions with the ejection seats. Donna?
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thank you. Captain Jennifer Casey was a proud member of the Snowbirds team and a proud Nova Scotian too. We'll have more on her and how she's being remembered a little bit later. As the military mourns, it's also dealing with a growing number of cases of COVID-19 within its ranks. Global News has learned the number of Canadian soldiers infected with the virus has jumped to 14. 43 others are now in self-isolation. The troops were exposed after being deployed to work in long-term care homes in Ontario and Quebec. In Quebec today, there are 707 confirmed new cases today. It is still the hardest hit province in Canada, but there is a reason for cautious optimism, though. 34 new deaths were reported in Quebec today. That is the lowest since mid-April. Next door in Ontario, the death toll has now surpassed 1,900. As for daily new cases, Ontario reported a slight dip today. 304 more people have tested positive. Business owners in Ontario are making some final adjustments before they reopen tomorrow. Ontario will roll out phase 1 of its plan to kickstart the economy after a month-long shutdown.
We've set up cash desks around the stores to ensure 2 meters between every guest and customer. In addition to that, we have virus shields. You'll kind of see throughout the store.
The state of emergency was declared in Ontario in mid-March. From tomorrow, retail stores like this one, plus vehicle dealerships, health services and other recreation and sports facilities have been given the green light to reopen. Businesses must take precautions, though, to keep customers and staff safe. Premier Doug Ford says businesses should only reopen if they are ready. As provinces begin to ease restrictions, there's a need to expand testing for COVID-19. In many places, it's still people with symptoms who get tested. That means people who may have the virus but don't have any symptoms are not being detected and could be spreading COVID-19 without knowing it. Heather Yourex-West reports on one province's efforts to gauge how many people are asymptomatic and why that's key to preparing for a possible second wave.
Robin Adair was tested last week for COVID-19, even though she had no symptoms and no known exposure.
A couple of the supermarkets I shop at in this neighborhood have had cases. So, I'm certainly aware it's been in the neighborhood, but none that I'm aware of directly, no.
Adair was one of 6,000 people to come forward for testing after the province announced last week that it would begin screening community members with no obvious symptoms for the disease. In its first week, Alberta's asymptomatic testing program tested 1,500 people and found 50 cases that were positive.
Surveillance in the general community is a very good idea as well, especially now, because we can, if there's a signal that's available, we can jump on that very quickly to prevent this from spiraling out of control and infecting lots of people.
Alberta's asymptomatic testing program is only open to residents of the Calgary region who have continued to work in the community. That's because most of the province's COVID-19 cases have been from this region. Provincial health officials say it doesn't make sense to expand the program province-wide.
We really want to focus our testing where we get the most clinical value, and so the broad-based testing across the province is unlikely to yield a lot of good clinical information.
Surveillance programs will become a key part of the country's COVID-19 strategy in the weeks ahead, particularly as lockdowns begin to lift. While Alberta is the first to roll out asymptomatic testing at a community level, other jurisdictions have used the strategy to test for outbreaks among high-risk populations, like the homeless, as well as those working and living in long-term care.
It's an expensive investment, but it's a very valuable investment because it pays off in dividends.
Adair, who works at a Chorus-owned radio station, the same company that owns Global News, says she wanted to be tested for her co-workers' sake. Her negative test result giving her, at least for the time being, some extra peace of mind. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Breaking news from the White House coming up: why the U.S. president says he's been taking a drug that's not approved for use in treating COVID-19. Plus, the day many Italians have been waiting for. The U.S. President Donald Trump made a surprising admission today. He says he's taking hydroxychloroquine and has been for several weeks. It's an anti-malarial drug. Trump has claimed it can cure or prevent COVID-19. The thing is, there is no scientific proof of that. In fact, there is evidence it can be harmful and can lead to heart problems and even death. Jackson Prosco is with me from Washington. Jackson, give us some context. Where did the president admit to this and why?
Well, Donna, the admission came a short time ago as Trump was actually responding to reporters about that whistleblower testimony from last week in which a government scientist said he was fired for objecting to the promotion of this unproven COVID-19 treatment. Well, Trump continues to insist it is fully effective. He now claims, without proof, that healthcare workers are taking it widely as a preventative measure. And even though he himself does not have COVID-19, he says he too has started taking it.
The frontline workers, many are taking it. I happen to be taking it. Hydroxychloroquine? I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine.
When?
Right now, yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I started taking it. Because I think it's good. I've heard a lot of good stories.
So I
have been taking it for about a week and a half.
Every day?
At some point, every day. I take a pill every day. At some point, I'll stop. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have the cure and/or the vaccine.
Jackson, the FDA has warned against using this drug outside of a hospital setting. What the president is doing could be dangerous to him and to those who follow his example. Why is he doing this?
Well, it could be a very simple attempt to change the channel or to prove his critics wrong. Remember, Trump was actively promoting this drug and then sort of backed away from it as those studies started to question its efficacy. Really, there were kind of three scenarios at play here. Scenario one is that Trump is in fact taking the drug and risking the side effects. Number two is that he's being given a placebo or a very low dose by his doctors. And number three is that he's not taking it at all, knowing that there's no way for the public to actually tell if he is or he isn't. At the bottom line here is that it's really a distraction from a pandemic that has now killed 90,000 people in this country. And Donna, it also speaks to the broader issue that keeps coming up time and time again, which is that Trump is prioritizing his own advice against that of scientists and doctors.
Jackson Prosco in Washington. Thanks. Ahead, a stunning reversal and a new promise from China. Life is slowly returning to a version of normal in Italy. Restrictions are easing after 10 weeks of lockdown. Italians can now sip a morning cappuccino at cafes and eat a slice of pizza with their partner. Church services are back, but with physical distancing in place. Italy was the first European country to impose a nationwide lockdown. A big change of heart from China today. President Xi Jinping told a World Health Organization meeting he now supports an investigation into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. Pressure was mounting. Over 120 countries have joined the call for an independent investigation. The U.S. has accused China and the WHO of trying to conceal the outbreak. Crystal Gamansing reports.
We must be frank about one of the primary reasons this outbreak spun out of control.
The United States, the current epicenter of the pandemic, is doubling down on its position that the World Health Organization helped China mislead the world.
There was a failure by this organization to obtain the information that the world needed, and that failure cost many lives.
They misled us.
Last month, the White House froze funding payments to the agency, ultimately questioning the effectiveness of the WHO. Xi Jinping again defended his country's actions, saying all along China has acted with openness, transparency, and responsibility. Against the blame game backdrop, a normally bureaucratic meeting of the WHO's governing body became somewhat dramatic. In the end, the WHO agreed to an independent review of its management of the pandemic, even as the vast majority of member nations demonstrated support for the agency. German Chancellor Angela Merkel saying the World Health Organization is the legitimate global institution where all threads come together. The Director General has been deflecting questions about politics for weeks, focusing instead on the virus itself.
The risk remains high. And we have a long road to travel.
South Korea says the WHO needs legal powers. Under current rules, the agency can't enter a country uninvited to investigate, and it can't compel governments to act. China now says it will allow for an impartial investigation once the pandemic is under control and has pledged $2 billion in support. Money that will fill the financial hole left by the U.S. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Next, remembering Captain Jennifer Casey, how she inspired on the ground and in the skies. The Snowbirds are ambassadors for the Canadian Armed Forces. They're a small, close-knit group based in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Formation flying takes precision, training, and trust. They cannot function if they don't work as a team. And Captain Jen Casey was a key member of that team. She was a former journalist and a proud Nova Scotian. As Ross Lord reports, she made friends across the country.
At age 35, Jennifer Casey, better known as Jen, did more than her share of living. First, Casey was a dedicated radio reporter and producer, mostly in her home city of Halifax. She went from serving her community to serving her country, joining the military as a public affairs officer with the Snowbirds acrobatic team. She flew with every mission for the past year and a half. A lover of sports and music, friends remember Casey as bright and witty with a positive attitude that rubbed off on others.
She was up for adventure and up for learning and up for talking about anything.
but it was never a serious side. It was always a happy, good-natured person, and it was just easy to make fast friends with her.
Her death joins a string of Nova Scotia-related tragedies with a particular cruelty. After the mass murders that killed 22 people in April, Navy sailor Abigail Cobra was among those honoring the victims. Then, she and 5 other military members based in Halifax were killed in the crash of a Cyclone helicopter. As a gesture of comfort, the Snowbirds conducted a special flyover in Nova Scotia. Captain Casey flying with the team over her home province. Now she's gone, leaving friends and former colleagues stunned.
2020 is a year I'd like to forget, and we're not even halfway there yet.
The crash that took Casey's life is also painful in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, the home of the Snowbirds.
I think it's time that we can take this opportunity to show them our gratitude and rally around them and let them know that we care and love them very much.
From Casey's professor, some consolation in the tragedy.
She was also doing something she really loved, and you know, so that doesn't make it any easier. But at the same time, it also says she was where she wanted to be at the time.
The military says it's making plans with Casey's family for events to mark her passing. Ross Lohr, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight soaring with the Snowbirds. This footage was taken Saturday as the Snowbirds flew from Alberta to Kamloops, BC, one day before Captain Casey's last flight. Their mission was to inspire Canadians and salute those on the front lines of the pandemic. Now the whole country is saluting the Snowbirds, sharing in their grief and looking forward to when they take to the skies again. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves.